There was no shouting or screaming, you know, "You bitch, what have you done?" or "You're going to shoot me." Lorna never even got up off the floor.
She was so angry that she killed her rival, not because she could not control herself.
Oh, God, she's all hurt. And it was my mate lying there.
at 10:30 a.m, September the 10th, 2002. In West London, Rena Salmon approaches a beauty salon armed with a double-barreled shotgun. At point-blank range, she shoots dead her love rival, Lorna Stewart.
A woman in her 30s from Berkshire has been arrested and is being questioned at a police station in the Chiswick area.
At the Old Bailey, Rena Salmon pleads not guilty to the charge of murder. But a jury convicts with a unanimous verdict, jailing her for life. Was Lorna Stewart the victim of a crime of passion, or premeditated murder, as the jury decided? Tonight, the story of an affair that drove a woman to take the life of her best friend. And by telephone, we interview Rena Salmon, the convicted murderer, from inside a secure hospital unit in Oxford. Rena Salmon was born in February 1960 in Birmingham, to a Bangladeshi father and British mother. She was raised with her 3 brothers and sisters by their mother in Burnley, Lancashire. In a telephone interview, Rena gave her own account of a troubled childhood which would leave emotional and physical scars for life.
Friday night was bath night. She'd be scrubbing away, saying that we were little black bastards and we'd ruined her life. Nobody wanted us and we were rubbish. And she'd be topping it up with hot water and she'd be topping it up with bleach. So it stung your eyes just being in the room, let alone getting in the bath. And she'd scrub and scrub till you were bleeding. And all the time it was because we were black. Because nobody wanted us and we were dirty.
The childhood that Rena Salmon described was a very abused childhood. She described having been beaten regularly and frequently by her mother from a very young age, and of being constantly given the message that she was worthless. So her own description of her childhood was a pretty awful childhood, which you would expect to cause emotional problems probably in most people.
I was 12 when I ran away. We were in and out of care, we were in and out of children's homes, and when I left, I pretended that none of it happened.
At the age of 19, she took a fateful decision. She joined the Women's Royal Army Corps.
I think her decision to go into the army was a search for stability, for structure, for certainty, and for safety, because her own family upbringing, as she described it, was not like that. And so people who have the sort of backgrounds that she had often feel much safer, more secure and emotionally well, if you like, when they're in very structured environments like the army.
While on tour in Northern Ireland, she met a dashing young signals technician. His name was Paul Salmon.
We met in the army. After a couple of weeks, we started going out with each other. He kept telling me that he loved me and I was special. And nobody's ever said that.
She also was always seeking to try to have a normal life, if you like. And so I think what she found in her relationship with her husband was both emotional security, but also the prospect of creating a sort of normal middle-class life, which was so different from what she said she'd experienced.
Rena and Paul Salmon married at Portsmouth Register Office 5 years after they met. 3 years later, Paul left the army to take up a well-paid job as an IT consultant. The couple decided to start a family. Rena Salmon was given an honorary discharge after becoming pregnant with their first child. A second child was born 2 years later. But as Rena settled into being the mum she'd never had, Paul was more restless and away from home for long periods.
Paul got out of the army and then Paul decided to move to Berkshire. So we moved to Berkshire and he was away a lot with work. So that made me even more clingy when he was there.
She had serious physical problems. She had a very serious back problem, which is well documented, and it was bad enough to have to take morphine. And as time went on, she became concerned about her appearance and thought she was becoming fat and unattractive. And I think that she worried that that might put strains on the marriage. So I think latterly she became very insecure.
A couple of weeks on the trot, he'd rung to say he had to go away. And then at the last minute, he'd just come home and it'd be like, what are you doing home? Oh, it got cancelled. One night, he was drunk and I asked him if he was having an affair. And he said no, but truth be told, he had had one.
Weeks later, the Salmons met another new family in their home village of Great Shefford, Berkshire. Lorna Stewart, who ran a successful beauty salon in London, and her husband, Keith Rodriguez, a steward for British Airways. They had a 4-year-old daughter, Kendall, and were expecting their second child.
It was the summer, and my daughter was out playing all the time. It's a little village, it's very friendly, very safe. She started bringing home this little girl. In the end, it was like, oh, well, you know, we need to take this little girl home, show me where the little girl lives, and we can tell her mummy and daddy where she is. And just said, like, no, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading, I live in the village, and obviously your daughter's been playing with mine all the time. And I just thought I had to bring her home because she'd done with us for a few hours. So she invited me in for a coffee, and I had coffee. She had warm water. I remember laughing and saying, why are you having warm water? You know, nothing in it. She said that she was into like holistic treatments and she didn't really like tea or coffee. We were sitting discussing all that, and she told me about a clinic up here in Chiswick.
Lorna Stewart's beauty salon was called Equilibrium and based on the High Road in the prosperous area of Chiswick in West London. It was a busy salon, and Lorna was popular with both customers and employees. Her accountant was Lindsay Rees.
She was wonderful. She was gregarious, outgoing, vivacious. Everybody liked her. All, you know, other women found her attractive in a friendly way. She didn't make you feel on edge. And men were attracted to her too. She had a real sense of fun about her that you enjoyed talking to her. And she actually made you feel really special when you spoke to her.
I think Lorna was probably all the things that Mrs. Salmon would like to have been. I mean, she was blonde, white, and so on, and I think that very much contrasted with what she alleged her mother said to her when she was a child.
She was really confident. She had a real air about her. She was really pretty. And I just thought, I like this lady. She's the sort of person I'd have as a friend. And that's what we became.
Both families grew closer. By day, the parents took turns to do the school run, and at weekends they'd throw parties for the village. But as far as Rena Salmon was concerned, her husband Paul had problems with Lorna.
Paul used to sit there and say that Lorna's full of it, you know, all she talks about is crap. She's just, you know, an empty shell, an empty vessel, she's all show. Lorna would go out and spend 300 quid on a pair of Jimmy Choo boots. Paul would be like, not a chance I'd allow that. So he was always putting her down when he spoke to me about him, and he didn't see, you know, why I was round there all the time, because she couldn't cook and she was stupid and a blonde bimbo.
Little did Rena Salmon know that Paul had started another affair. But this time, it wasn't a fling she could ignore. Paul had started sleeping with their neighbour, the woman he apparently despised. Rena's friend, Lorna Stewart. In December 2001, just days before Christmas, Lorna's husband, Keith Rodriguez, was at home. He'd given up his job to look after their 2 children and to help out with Lorna's business. He was working at the computer when he accidentally discovered a suspicious-looking email to his wife.
Keith Rodriguez, Lorna's husband, discovered an email from Paul Salmon to Lorna saying how much he'd enjoyed holding her at their last meeting. And Keith Rodriguez confronted Lorna about her unfaithfulness. She couldn't conceal it. It was there electronically on the screen. And there was a meeting between the 3 of them.
Lorna and Paul claimed it was just a fling, which they promised to end. They begged Keith to keep the affair a secret from Rena, and he managed to, despite everyone spending Christmas together at the Salmon's house. Rena remained unaware throughout the holiday. But then came the first sign of trouble.
It started for me on 3rd of January. The kids were friends for a sleepover. So where Christmas and New Year had been really hectic and we hadn't seen a lot of each other, this was meant to be like our romantic night. And we were going out for a meal and everything. And we'd come home, said he needed to talk, so he sat me down, told me he was unhappy. And that he needed some time on his own. Well, you've heard all the cliches, seen all the films. And was it me? No, it wasn't me. It was him. He just needed time. And I got on my hands and knees and begged him. I'd do anything, just as long as he didn't leave us. And I asked him outright if there was anybody else. He said no. So, what do? What do women do? They go and tell their best friend. So, I went and told my best friend. It was Lorna.
It's January 2002. Rena Salmon has been told by her husband Paul that he's leaving her. Rena is terrified that the secure family life she thought she had is crumbling. She turns for help to her best friend, Lorna Stewart.
Lorna got back and I told her. And she was all sympathetic and said, like, you know, it's just a phase they're going through. It was all to do with the new moons and the change in the planets and the comet coming and all this lot. I was like, well, I don't really care what it's all about, but how do I sort it? She said, well, you've put on a bit of weight, let's get that sorted, let's go buy you some nice sexy underwear. So off we trots, takes me to La Perla, and I spent more on a bra than I'd ever spent on a whole outfit. But it was worth it if it was going to do the job.
But Rena Salmon's efforts to win back her husband were about to be wrecked by some devastating news.
Paul took my son back to school, back to boarding school, and he didn't come home, and I started to panic. There must have been a crash, was there anything wrong with him? And I kept texting him, and he got in about 2:30 and went to bed, and I slept on the sofa. But I had said to him then, I don't deserve this, there's no way to treat me, it's not fair. So the next day, I'm whinging. I'm saying, I can't believe he's done this to me, Lorna. You know, he just didn't ring, nothing. I was really panicking. Ben had phoned to say Daddy had left hours before. He said, he's been so selfish. And I don't know what to do. And Keith was there the next day. My daughter came in and she said, Keith's crying, Mummy. He come in, I said, what's the matter? And he told me that Lorna was having an affair. And I remember him saying, it's not the worst bit, it's Paul.
Rena was absolutely furious and locked Paul out of the house, an attempt that was only partially successful. And thereafter, the deterioration of the marriage accelerated right the way through the year.
I phoned Paul back, ranting and raving, and said to him, you will never see me and the kids alive again. I think the instinct was just, if I'm dead, it's all gone. If I'm not Paul's wife, then what am I?
Anybody who finds out that their partner is having an affair clearly is going to be very distressed. Mrs. Salmon had particular vulnerabilities that meant that her reaction almost certainly was much more than that. And the vulnerabilities are to do with how her childhood was, as she describes it, and so on. And almost certainly what happened was that she started to get symptoms of a depressive illness.
The effect it had on Rena, gradually and cumulatively, was, again, if the Crown are right in their interpretation, a mounting murderous intent, though it wasn't entirely clear that at the outset it was necessarily towards Lorna.
On January the 10th, 2002, Lorna Stewart and Paul Salmon ended their affair. They would try to make their own marriages work for the sake of their children. For Lorna and her husband Keith Rodriguez, it would mean a fresh start on the other side of the world. For Rena Salmon, it meant taking back her husband Paul after he pleaded for forgiveness.
Paul rang to say come home. He'd made a mistake, he did love me. It had just been a couple of weeks and it wasn't an affair, they just used to meet for coffee and to talk. You want to believe it, so you do. And I desperately, desperately wanted to believe it. And then Keith rang to say that they were going to Australia
When Lorna decided to go off to Australia, she asked me would I run the business from the finance and admin side, and she would have one of the girls would actually run the therapist side.
Lorna's